Nearly 6 weeks into the U.S. military campaign against Iran, a new Pew Research Center survey looks at how Americans view the conflict. The survey examines what concerns Americans most. It also asks whether they think the United States is doing enough to avoid civilian casualties. Another question is how confident Americans are in President Donald Trump's decisions about Iran. Finally, the survey explores what Americans think the long-term outcomes of the war may be. The survey was conducted from March 23 through March 29 among 3,507 U.S. adults. It provides a snapshot of how Americans view key aspects of the Iran war during this stage of the conflict. One of the survey's first findings is that Americans are closely divided on whether the United States is doing enough to prevent civilian casualties in the Iran war. 41% say it is doing enough, while 45% say it is not doing enough. Another 13% say they are not sure. The survey also asks whether Americans are confident that President Donald Trump can make good decisions about Iran. 35% say they are very or somewhat confident, while 64% say they are not or not at all confident. Around two-thirds of Republicans are confident in Trump's policymaking toward Iran, compared with fewer than 1 in 10 Democrats. Among all the possible outcomes included in the survey, one concern stands out above the rest. Nearly 7 in 10 Americans say they are concerned that the U.S. military action against Iran could lead to higher gas and fuel prices, making it the public's biggest concern. Higher gas and fuel prices lead the list of Americans' concerns. 69% Americans say they are concerned about this outcome, including nearly half who are extremely concerned. Majorities are also concerned about the United States sending ground troops into Iran, large numbers of military casualties, terrorist attacks in the United States, and the possibility that the conflict could expand beyond the Middle East. By comparison, concern about a shortage of weapons for the U.S. military is about 3 in 10 Americans saying they are concerned. Beyond these specific concerns, most Americans, 77%, say the U.S. military action against Iran is important to them personally, including 48% who say it is very important to them. The survey also examines whether Americans are confident that President Donald Trump can make good decisions about U.S. policy toward Iran. Compared with previous surveys, confidence in Trump's dealings with Iran has declined among both Republicans and Democrats. Overall, 35% of Americans say they are confident that President Donald Trump can make good decisions when it comes to U.S. policy toward Iran. 16% say they are very confident, and another 19% say they are somewhat confident. By comparison, 21% say they are not too confident, and 42% say they are not at all confident. Together, 64% express little or no confidence in Trump's policymaking toward Iran. Confidence in Trump's dealings with Iran is down 12 percentage points since 2024, when he was running for a second presidential term. It has also declined by 9 points since August 2025. Among Republicans, confidence has fallen by 18 percentage points since 2024, and by 12 points since 2025. Among Democrats, confidence has decreased from 14% in 2025 to 7% today. There is also a stark age divide among Republicans. Republicans ages 18 to 29 are divided. 46% are confident in Trump's policymaking toward Iran, while 53% are not. Among Republicans ages 65 and older, 80% are confident in Trump's ability to make good decisions in this area. The survey also looks at what concerns Americans most about the U.S. military action against Iran. It asks about several possible outcomes, including higher gas and fuel prices, the United States sending ground troops into Iran, large numbers of U.S. military casualties, terrorist attacks in the United States, the war expanding outside the Middle East, and a shortage of weapons for the U.S. military. About 7 in 10 Americans, or 69%, are concerned about higher gas and fuel prices as a result of the U.S. military action against Iran. 45% say they are extremely concerned. Of the potential outcomes included in the survey, this one worries Americans the most. Levels of concern also differ by party. Still, most Democrats, 79%, and Republicans, 59%, are worried about higher gas prices as a result of the Iran war. Democrats are also more concerned than Republicans About the United States sending ground troops into Iran, large numbers of U.S. military casualties, terrorist attacks in the United States, and the war expanding outside the Middle East, Democrats are about twice as concerned as Republicans about the conflict expanding outside the Middle East. Another important question in the survey focuses on whether Americans think the United States and Iran are doing enough to avoid civilian casualties during the conflict. Majorities of Americans in both parties say Iran is not doing enough to avoid civilian casualties in the war. The public is more divided when it comes to the United States. Slightly more Americans say the United States is not doing enough to prevent civilian casualties, 45%, than say it is doing enough, at 41%. Another 13% are not sure. When it comes to Iran, 69% say Iran is not doing enough to avoid civilian casualties. Only 11% say Iran is doing enough, while 19% are not sure. Around two-thirds of Democrats, 68%, say the United States is not doing enough to avoid civilian casualties. By comparison, 23% of Republicans say the same. Most Republicans, 65%, say the United States is doing enough to prevent civilian casualties. Beyond current concerns about the conflict, the survey also asks what Americans think the long-term outcomes of the war may be. It looks at whether U.S. military action will affect Iran's ability to develop a nuclear weapon and how the conflict may affect the future of the Iranian people. Americans are evenly divided on whether U.S. military action will change Iran's ability to develop a nuclear weapon. 27% say Iran will be more likely to develop a nuclear weapon. Another 27% say it will be less likely. 29% say it will be about as likely as before. 16% are not sure. Among Republicans, adults ages 65 and older are much more likely than those ages 18 to 29 to say Iran will be less likely to develop a nuclear weapon in the long run. 67% of Republicans ages 65 and older hold this view, compared with 25% of Republicans ages 18 to 29. Among Democrats, adults ages 18 to 29 are more likely than those ages 65 and older to say Iran will be more likely to develop a nuclear weapon. 45% of younger Democrats say this, compared with 25% of older Democrats. When it comes to the ultimate outcome of U.S. military action, 36% of Americans say the Iranian people will be worse off. 25% say they will be better off. 16% expect no change. Another 21% are not sure. Again, there are age differences within each party, but the contrast is much more stark among Republicans. Around 6 in 10 adults ages 65 and older, or 63%, say the Iranian people will be better off in the long run. That compares with 33% of Republicans, ages 18 to 29. The survey also asked Americans how confident they are in President Donald Trump's decisions across a range of foreign policy issues. These include his decision-making in 12 foreign policy areas, including bilateral relations with several countries, trade, and international military conflicts. There is no issue on which a majority express confidence in Trump, but he garners more support in some areas than others. Confidence is highest on the relationship between the United States and Israel, where 43% say they are very or somewhat confident. Confidence is lowest on the war between Ukraine and Russia, at 32%. There are wide and persistent partisan differences across every foreign policy issue included in the survey. Among Republicans and Republican-leaning independents, confidence ranges from 74% on U.S. trade policy to 60% on the war between Ukraine and Russia. Among Democrats and Democratic leaners, confidence reaches 16% on U.S.-Israel relations. Only 7% express confidence in Trump's handling of U.S. policy toward Iran and the war between Ukraine and Russia. Confidence in President Trump's ability to make good decisions on several foreign policy issues has declined over time. Confidence on the war between Ukraine and Russia fell from 45% in 2024 to 40% in 2025 and stands at 32% today. Confidence in U.S. policy toward Iran, China, and North Korea has also declined. Views on U.S. relations with Israel and Canada have not changed since 2025. Confidence in U.S. policy toward Venezuela has also declined since January. Overall, nearly 6 weeks into the U.S. military campaign against Iran, this Pew Research Center survey finds that higher gas prices are the outcome that concerns Americans the most. But majority is also worrying about the United States sending ground troops into Iran, large numbers of military casualties, terrorist attacks on U.S. soil, and the war expanding outside the Middle East.